Hey everyone, it's Spoony Bard back with my DC Deluge of pickups. I've got a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to get right into it. The first book up is Superboy, The Boy of Steel. This collects Adventure Comics issues number 1 through 3 and 5 and 6, and it reprints Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes number 222. So first off, despite the cover, Superboy Prime is not anywhere in this book. This is written by Jeff Johns, and it follows Connor Kent as he was returned to life. He was actually killed during Infinite Crisis fighting Superboy Prime. This is about him trying to sort of reconnect with the world, with his old friends, and trying to make sense of who he is. We know he's a clone of Superman's DNA, but he's also mixed with human DNA from Lex Luthor. So there's a story where Connor's trying to learn more about his one of his paternal lineages, and that would be Lex Luthor. Connor doesn't want to think that his dad, for lack of a better term, is completely evil, and there has to be some good in him. Lex does show up, demonstrates a great capacity for compassion, and then turns it around in typical Lex Luthor fashion. I don't want to give too much away. Try not to do as many spoilers, but I will say this book is a really enjoyable read. Ever since Jeff Johns started working on the character with Teen Titans, Superboy has become one of my favorite characters, and I really like the development here, and the art by Francis Manifold doesn't hurt either. Legion 222 is pretty boring. Tyrock, the guy you see on the cover there manacled up, who has sonic powers, he's framed because he put in a request to move the Legion headquarters and it was denied. And then later he seems to be going on a rampage, so they subdue him, but then it turns out somebody just used a tape recorder with his voice on it to frame him, and they catch the guy and he's released. The end. The next book is Nightwing, The Great Leap. Collects Nightwing issues 147 through 153, and it also reprints Superman number 158. So this is the last Nightwing story before the whole battle for the cowl, Batman RIP, ultimately leading to Dick Grayson becoming the new Batman with Damian Wayne as his Robin. So this is very much kind of a farewell tour, wrapping up a lot of kind of plot lines and stuff. There is kind of a showdown with Two-Face, who on one of Dick Grayson's earlier missions as Robin, he really just got the crap beat out of him by Two-Face, so this is kind of like a final showdown type of thing. This book actually has some amazing artists working on it. I think Don Kramer does the majority of the art, but you also see Rags Morales, Doug Monkey, and Joe Bennett at times. It was an enjoyable read, considering it was kind of just wrapping up loose ends. I already had known that, the battle for the cowl and that he became the new Batman, so it wasn't a surprise, but it was nice to see how his first solo ongoing ended. Now, for the backup, you might be asking, why did they reprint a Superman book in a Batman family related title like Nightwing? Well, Superman 158 features a story where Superman and Jimmy Olsen get shrunk and infiltrate the bottle city of Kandor. And in order to sort of fight crime, they adopt these two identities of Nightwing and Flamebird. Very much, I think, inspired by Batman and Robin, but apparently there were some ancient Kryptonian legends of some heroes like that. Anyways, at some point, Superman tells Dick Grayson about this story, and as he's starting off as his own man as a superhero, he adopts that name, which I always thought was cool. It's kind of like Batman's his dad, but Superman's like the cool uncle. The third book is Superman, Kryptonite Nevermore. This collects Superman Volume 1, number 233 through 238, and 240 through 242. It also reprints Action Comics 261. Now, this marked an era of an all-new Superman direction. What was notable was that Denny O'Neil came over and took over writing duties for the title. If you don't, for some reason, recognize the name Denny O'Neil, he is a legend for DC. He, and some people debate whether this was a good idea or not, but he stripped Wonder Woman of her powers, and she learned how to be like a kick-ass person without magic powers. He transformed Green Arrow from some weirdo Robin Hood wannabe into the kind of social advocate that we see nowadays. That whole kind of Robin Hood mentality really took shape with the Green Lantern Green Arrow title. And then obviously after that, Denny O'Neil took over Batman and gave us some classic stuff like the introduction of Man-Bat, the creation of Ra's al Ghul, Talia, the League of Assassins, which led to Damian Wayne, the current Robin. So, anyways, Denny O'Neil's taken over the title, and right away he wants to shake up the status quo. Kryptonite, since its introduction, had kind of been overused. Like, there were like 11 different kinds of kryptonite, and they seemed plentiful. So what he wanted to do was eliminate that as a plot device to come up with more interesting stories as to how Superman could be defeated. So the basic plot is that they're able to eliminate a lot of the kryptonite that's on Earth, but somehow afterwards Superman powers seem to be weakening on their own. So the mystery is, what's going on and how to get there. The book is drawn by Superman artist, legendary artist Curt Swan. This is a guy who drew Superman for over 30 years. Like, for a lot of people, if they think of Superman, his is one of the depictions that first comes to mind. Going back to the topic of ridiculous amount of kryptonite, we see Kryptonite X featured in the Action Comics number 261 backup. It's a story where Supergirl finds a little cat and she kind of takes it in, and the cat gets exposed to Kryptonite X and somehow gains superpowers temporarily. She finds out, they play a little bit, and then the powers wear off. And the last panel is the cat dreaming about wanting to become Super Cat again, and it invites readers to write in and let them know if you want to see more of this, which I guess they did. So the next book is Superman, Dark Knight over Metropolis. It collects Action Comics Annual number 1 from 1987, Adventures of Superman number 466 and 467, Action Comics 653 and 654, and Superman number 44. And it also reprints Action Comics number 293. Following the reboot of the DCU with Crisis on Infinite Earths, these stories collected here are some of the first post-crisis encounters of Superman and Batman. The Action Comics Annual number 1, I believe, is supposed to be their first appearance together. Batman's on a case in Louisiana, and he needs some help, so he calls Clark Kent because he knows he's friends with Superman and asks him to get Superman involved. There's a story in here that's actually pretty important to the overall DCU, though it's not really labeled as such. So there's an issue of Superman where they tried to kind of do a tragic take on the Fantastic Four. There was a team of scientists on experimental flight. They got hit with some kind of radiation, came back to Earth with weird powers that they couldn't control. But it was much more of like a miserable thing. Like, they hated it. Like, whatever the DC equivalent of the Thing was like a creature that just looked miserable and was in constant agony and stuff. Anyways, why this is significant is because the main character, or the sort of leader of that team, the Mr. Fantastic, if you will, was Hank Henshaw, who later becomes the cyborg Superman, who later becomes a huge threat in the Green Lantern books. So this is the first appearance of Hank Henshaw and the first and only appearance of him in his human form. Now, The Dark Knight over Metropolis was a 3-part storyline that dealt with the Kryptonite Ring. Earlier on in the post-crisis Superman continuity, Lex Luthor had found a piece of kryptonite, realized it weakened Superman, and fashioned it onto a ring that he wore all the time in order to sort of be able to keep Superman at bay. But the radiation ended up costing him his hand and later his body. There's a whole clone thing. But it cost him his hand, and so the ring was put into a vault. Disgruntled Luthor scientists stole the ring, tried to confront Clark Kent with it, but she ultimately gets killed in some unrelated thing, and the ring goes missing. So Superman and Batman team up to deal with some other stuff, and at the end of the story, this is where kind of the first time we see that Superman gives the ring to Batman, because he says, if like if I get mind controlled or something like that, I want the ring in to be the hands of somebody I can trust with my life. Adventure Comics number 293 is just Silver Age silliness. So apparently the Legion of Superheroes has turned their back on Superboy and they're attacking him with kryptonite rings, which is how this relates to the rest of the books, and it turns out there's evil floating brains controlling them. The next book is simply called Cosmic Odyssey. It collects the Cosmic Odyssey 4-issue miniseries, and it also reprints Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 133. Okay, first off, I want to say this book is written by Jim Starlin. If the name doesn't sound familiar to you, this guy does cosmic comic books really well. He created Thanos and Drax for Marvel and is the one who wrote and created the Infinity Gauntlet saga. So this is him doing some sci-fi stuff at DC. This is post-crisis, and he's definitely trying to incorporate the Jack Kirby Fourth World stuff more into the DCU. Anyways, there's crazy stuff going on in the universe that is so dangerous that Darkseid actually assembles a team, including some of the New Gods and some of the Justice League, to help him stop the coming calamity. Now, a number of significant things actually happen in this miniseries. In the 80s, there was a Demon miniseries that ended in a place where the Demon and Jason Blood were separated as two different beings. They are reunited as one in this book. Also, there's a Green Lantern character called Fatality. I think she's a Star Sapphire now. Anyways, Fatality was the sole survivor of a planet called Xanshi. And in this storyline, we actually see the destruction of Xanshi and actually its entire solar system. So it gives us a better understanding of why she hates the Green Lanterns. The art is also done by Mike Mignola, who is of Hellboy fame. This is some of the last work he did at DC before he left for Dark Horse and never looked back. While I think this was originally just supposed to be a mini-series, the scope of it and the impact that it ended up having in the decades to come, I really feel like this was an event, but not one you need to go out of your way to track down. Jimmy Olsen 133 is included simply because it's the first issue of Jack Kirby and his creation of the Fourth World. It's kind of a weird issue where he joins a biker gang in this like wooded area. It led to some interesting stuff, but just off the jump, you could see that Kirby came with some wild ideas. Our next book up is Batman Superpowers. Collects Batman Confidential numbers 50 through 54 and reprints Justice League of America number 1 from 1960. Now, first, I want to say I did not realize the series ran for this long. This is the last arc of the Batman Confidential series. I really stopped reading somewhere in the teens. I assumed they canceled the book around when they canceled the Superman Confidential. Anyways, this is kind of set in 3 different time periods. The first one is sort of set sometime after identity crisis where Batman finds out he's been mind wiped, and why did he ever kind of join up with these people in the first place? Like, he has no powers and they're all like superpowered beings. Um, so then he flashes back to 7 years ago when he was just kind of starting off as a crime fighter, and it was one of the first times he'd ever encountered a superpower being. And while that story is going on, he's also flashbacking to, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years before that, before he was still the Batman and he was traveling the world and training and stuff like that. Um, and it's during these travels through China that it's the first time he meets a group of people that have like superpowers. They take some opium derived drug and it gives them abilities for a period of time. Interestingly enough, though, this story also does take place in the Xinjiang province of China, so I guess there's always been bad stuff going on there. The story's pretty good, but the art by penciler Jerry Bingham is just nuts. He is both penciling and painting the scenes, depending on sort of what time period it is. And sometimes you get both on the same page, and it's just a really cool look. And Justice League of America #1, despite being the first issue of Justice League of America, was actually their third appearance. They started off as a Showcase Presents. Their first opponent was Starro the Star Conqueror, who, if you've seen the James Gunn Suicide Squad, you'll recognize from that movie. And then I think the second appearance also in Showcase Presents was they fought Amazo the android that could like duplicate all their powers. So in here, the first issue of their series proper, they're facing off against an alien called Despero. He has mind control abilities. He looks kind of weird here. They definitely do a really cool overhaul of the character in the 80s. Anyways, it's a Silver Age team up book origin story, so you kind of know what it's going to be. The next book is The Atom, Sword of the Atom. Collects Sword of the Atom miniseries issues 1 through 4 and Sword of the Atom special issues 1 through 3. It also reprints Showcase number 34. Now, I had not read this going into it. I had heard a lot of good things. A lot of people said this was a really good series. Um, I was never really a big fan of the Atom character, so I never really felt the need to track it down. But I'm glad I did read this. This is essentially, well, I read Planet Hulk first, but this is essentially an earlier version of that, and I really dig the idea. So you take like a sci-fi character, like a scientist like the Atom, or like a scientist slash atomic creature like the Hulk and Banner, and you put them into a sword and sorcery setting as opposed to like a sci-fi modern setting, and it works really cool. So the Atom gets stuck at a miniature size, and he can't sort of reverse it, and he encounters this whole civilization, and he determines that he wants to help them and stuff like that. The book also, I feel, really gave me personally a lot of information about Ray Palmer and Jean Loring's relationship, their tumultuous relationship. Without spoiling Identity Crisis, you definitely see more of that play out through that series. Anyways, I'm glad I read this. I'm sorry it took me so long. I definitely want to go check out Planet Hulk after this because just reading through this, I recognized elements from this that I think Greg Pak used for Planet Hulk. Although I love the story, so I don't really care if he lifted too much. Showcase Comics number 34 is the first appearance of Ray Palmer, the Silver Age Atom. And that's about it. It's Silver Age origin story, so it's kind of as mundane as you'd expect. Threat pops up, he figures out what the threat is, he beats the threat, the end. And the final book is a great one. It's Green Lantern, and it collects the Emerald Twilight and New Dawn storylines. So it collects issues of Green Lantern Volume 2, number 48 through 55, and it also reprints Green Lantern number 87. Issues 48 through 50 are the Emerald Twilight storyline. Remember Hank Henshaw, the cyborg Superman I mentioned earlier in the Superman Batman Dark Knight over Metropolis book? Well, he ended up with the cosmic villain Mongol. They ended up destroying Coast City, which was Hal Jordan's home, because I think they were trying to turn Earth into a new war world, and that was going to be one of its like fire pits or something. Anyways, so the loss completely drove Hal Jordan over the edge. He tried to recreate the city with his energy, trying to living beings and all, but he did not have enough to sustain it. So he basically went around defeating the other Green Lanterns and taking their rings because he wanted to confront the Guardians. He wanted access to the central power battery so that could give him the energy he needs to fulfill his wishes. And ultimately, the Guardians of Oa, once he confronts them, they open the central power battery and they release Sinestro, who's been in prison there the whole time. Anyways, Hal and Sinestro fight, and eventually Hal is able to access the central battery and basically absorb all its power into himself and becomes the villain known as Parallax. Green Lantern issues 51 through 55 are dealing with Kyle Rayner, who becomes the new Green Lantern as he sort of first gets the ring and is learning how to use it and his kind of first team up with Superman. And this also does feature the infamous women in refrigerator scene. I don't know if you guys know too much about that. The idea is it's a trope wherein female characters are introduced so that they can get murdered in order to give the male characters incentive to take action. Uh, you actually see it a lot in media. It doesn't just happen with female characters, but perhaps they meet more gruesome ends. I don't know. I had never actually read these early Kyle Rayner stories, so this was kind of cool for me to get a sense of how he started out. Green Lantern number 87 features the first appearance of John Stewart. So what happened was originally when Abin Sur crashed on Earth and he chose Hal Jordan as his replacement, he actually chose a secondary replacement in Guy Gardner, but Guy was too far away at the time, so the ring chose Hal. But Guy Gardner was kind of recognized as like a backup just in case. Now, what happened was Guy Gardner ended up getting injured while trying to save like a bus full of kids or something. And so the Guardians, recognizing Earth still needs like a backup Green Lantern, they appointed the ring to John Stewart. And this issue is really just kind of him and Hal getting to know each other and Hal kind of showing him the ropes. What is cool is right off the bat, though, he rips off his Green Lantern mask and he says, "You know, I've got nothing to hide. I'm gonna let it all hang out." Anyways, that's it for this video. I apologize for all the many delays. I will take a small break from doing these videos. Because I feel like I want to do something else. But I've got at least 2 more of these videos that I'm going to have coming out soon. So if that's what you're here for, just stay tuned. Otherwise, thanks for watching. See you next time.